Okay, so today's video blog is going to be a bit about therapy, but my dog just came and sat on my lap. So, yeah, just patting him for the moment, and now my camera angle is like all out of whack. So yeah, following up on that video I made, the quick update about how I had a new referral for therapy, yeah, that's what I'm going to try and talk about a bit in this video, but I am a little bit, like, my brain is a little bit all over the place. I haven't slept well the past couple days. I'm still in my pajamas today, and so yeah, this is going to be a little bit more meandering and rambly, I think, and going on tangents. Which luckily I'm not a pro YouTuber, so I can do whatever I want and it doesn't matter. So yeah, strap yourselves in for a bit of a rambly wander. Also, before I get into talking about the therapy, I just want to, I think I want to try and focus more on doing stuff on YouTube and Patreon. In the past, I've done a lot of updates on my Facebook, friends only Facebook, but their censorship has finally gotten weird enough that it's hitting me, and like, I'm not someone who talks about controversial political stuff or anything, which most other platforms would hit you for. It's just like, I made a joke where I said, the backstory is just like, I was trying to find out from a band what time they were playing, because I'm trying to manage, you know, I don't want to go out, but if I do go out, I want to go to Nando's and get my favorite food, and, you know, but I don't want to miss that one band that I went out to see. Like, I don't want to sit through a whole gig and miss the one band that I was interested in seeing. So I was trying to find out from them, when you guys playing? I want to be sure I catch you. And they didn't reply. They saw my message, they didn't reply. Every member of the band should know what time you're playing, so how hard is it to just say we're on at this time? You know, so I just was feeling like, I made a post on Facebook, like, you know, local bands with only a few hundred fans cannot afford to be like that. You know, you can't act so distant from the people who are potentially wanting to support you, like, especially post-COVID, when, you know, the gig scene is trying to rebuild itself. So it just seemed kind of rude, and I ended up not going. But yeah, I posted a bit about that situation, and then someone commented saying something like, oh, maybe they're just scared of you, because when I write, sometimes it can come across as a little bit maybe aggressive or so on, but that's usually when I go on like 1,000-word rant. This was just a few words. Hey, what time are you playing? Want to make sure I catch you. And yeah, so I replied to this person who was like, maybe we're too scary. I was like, this is all I said. And, you know, I said, you know, I wanted to be sure to catch you, as in catch your performance, not that I was going to catch them and like kidnap them and drag them off and I, you know, do some violent stuff. And Facebook's bot did not leave that comment up very long. I said I was not going to do certain violent things, and Facebook's bot is just like, nope, you mentioned certain keywords and that comment is banned. And because I've been hit for quoting Remix Gladys, Dictator Gladys, I don't know if you guys know Remix Matrix channel, they've edited together Australian politicians in hilarious ways, and I quoted yeah, Remix Gladys, and so I got hit for that like a year ago. Just like, yeah, not like, I just didn't expect that. And so because I've already had a couple of hits, this time, even though I said I'm not going to do those violent things, Facebook's like, nope, and you can't even appeal. I can still post on my page, but it put in a bunch of other restrictions, and I just know that, like, if I say the wrong keyword again in the future, they're going to suspend my account, even though they've admitted in the past that they got it wrong. So when I quoted Remix Gladys, I appealed, and then they're like, oh, we got it wrong, we're sorry. But they've listed those ones they said sorry about as reasons to restrict me now and not allow me to appeal. And I'm just like, that is not how these kinds of content strikes should go. Like, I was just having a casual conversation with a friend making jokes. And so as far as platforms go, restricting my ability to express myself, I'm like, Facebook suddenly just became the worst, because I can't even make a joke. And like, you know, it's bad enough being an Aussie, we like to swear, it's casual, it's not that offensive, but American platforms are just, you know, crazy about that stuff. And so I'm just like, I don't know that Facebook is really a great place for me to say what I need to say. So yeah, I'm thinking of doing more stuff on YouTube and Patreon. Patreon's easier because I can write, so I don't have to wait to have a time when I can actually film. Like, that's the reason this update is taking so long, because I almost never have the place to myself, and you know, my setup's bad, and just trying to manage everything and the things I'm doing during the day, it's yeah, it's tricky. But yeah, so most of the updates are going on Patreon, but also Patreon, because of the paywall, there's a degree of privacy, so I can go into things in a little bit more depth than I'd want to see on YouTube. So it's almost like the Facebook friends only thing, but a little bit more open in a way, but a little bit more closed because of the paywall. I don't know. Anyway, so yeah, that's something I've been thinking about, is just trying to do that. So hopefully I'll end up doing more YouTube, but because it's so hard to get good time to film and all that, we will see. It might end up just being more Patreon updates. Anyway, so that's like 5 minutes of stuff that's a bit not related to the therapy, but okay. So yeah, as I was said previously, my doctor referred me to a new psychology clinic. I had tried to find someone myself, and their books were closed. So yeah, and that's a big problem at the moment, because, you know, post-pandemic, post-lockdowns, apparently everyone has mental health issues, and so there's just not enough clinics with spaces. But also, you know, with the number of problems they have, then you need to find someone who actually knows what they're doing instead of someone fresh out of uni, so that's a complicating factor. Anyway, so what should I start with? Well, yeah, no, finding a therapist is hard. So, you know, I said my doctor gave me that referral, and sorry, I know the lighting gets a little bit weird sometimes as the sun moves around and whatever, we'll just have to deal with it. Oh, did I mention one of the reasons we're sitting out here is we've got a new duck for the duck army, and I thought I'd show that off. My dad went on a business trip, came home with this guy, so we have a new duck for the duck army. Goes on a little bit more that way. Sorry, yes, brain focusing, not focusing. What was I saying? Something to do with finding. Okay, so I got the referral for the psychology clinic, and yeah, I've written a bit about this on Patreon, but basically, so at first it seemed like they didn't have spaces, and so my doctor gave me a few more clinics to contact, and also my godmother found me a clinic to contact, but same sort of thing, is like everyone's books are either closed, or because I've mentioned that I've got SPD, schizoid personality disorder, and I also want to try schema therapy, some of them did have openings, but they're like, we don't have the experience to be able to deal with this. So yeah, out of all the alternatives, I got knocked back either because they were full or couldn't handle me. But in the end, the original clinic came back and were like, yeah, no, actually we can take you on. And I think it's because I noticed on their website they were advertising, we do have appointments available. And I wrote to them saying like, hey, maybe you should change that, because, you know, people with mental health problems can't really, like, you know, don't need the extra disappointment to make them feel worse. So I was just making that suggestion, and then all of a sudden they do have places. And so I was able to get in, and I've already been to my first therapy session a couple days ago. So yeah, it was kind of like not a smooth process to get in, but I'm in. And yeah, I think the lady, like, oh my god, the intake process was pretty full on, because like they asked for a history, but there was no word limit, so of course, me being me, I wrote a lot. But I think that was good, because it meant that they, like, you know, they have a bunch of psychologists, and so they could read that and be like, okay, this is the person who would be most suitable. And looking at her experience, I was like, yeah, okay, that makes sense. I mean, you know, I'm not expecting a therapist to have really much experience with schizoid personality disorder, but you know, other things like schema therapy, different approaches. And I guess I should get into why I'm going to therapy, because I think after that video, and sometimes on other videos, you know, people are like, why would you do therapy given you have schizoid personality disorder? Because a lot of schizoids don't want to do therapy. I think the reason usually given is that we don't see anything wrong with our way of thinking. But for me, like, I can see, okay, so first of all, I don't just have SPD, I also have comorbid depression. and some other issues. I did try to write some notes to keep me on track. Clearly that's not going very well because we've already meandered between bans and Facebook censorship and ducks. Anyway, yeah, no, so why therapy? Because, yeah, depression is something that I want to work on, and, like, with schizoids, like, the advice my GP gave me, and also advice that I've heard other people say, is that if you want to do therapy as a schizoid, you need to have a particular goal. It can't just be to get through schizoid, it's got to be about something else. So, yeah, I've had some flare-ups of depression that have gotten really bad. I think I've been doing the nasal spray for the hay fever stuff, and I think that maybe threw off my mood for a bit, although I'm doing a little bit better. I'd stopped using it for a while, and then I started again, and then, like, I had a day off one day, and I think I'm hopefully managing it better, although maybe just the fact that I'm doing therapy is, like, the illusion of doing something. Maybe that's helping, I don't know. But anyway, my mood's been all over the place, and I've had a lot of those thoughts of, like, I just don't want to be here, and that's what prompted my doctor to be like, maybe we should give it another go. But yeah, so depression, and I can also see, like, I want to get my life back on track, because even though I've got the schizoid diagnosis now, I know that I've been able to do more in the past. I have heard that sometimes these kinds of personality disorders can get worse over time, especially without treatment. So maybe I'm just in a natural, deterioration, which is a little bit like, I hope not, because I'm not happy with life just floating around. I've reached a point of stability, I guess, because, I finally accepted, like, my parents' help instead of feeling like I have to always be making my own money and find out how to survive, like, on my own or whatever. And then, gotten into a fairly stable pattern in terms of what I do every week and most days. But it's so pointless. Like, all it is me being in a holding pattern between now and death. Like, is this just what my life is? I'm just not happy with that. I guess when I was younger, they tell you that life is going to go somewhere, and I guess part of me still clings to that. I'm just not happy with just doing the same shit every day, So yeah, I want to try and figure out if there's a way to get my life back on track, or at least just make it more interesting, maybe make it feel like it's going somewhere instead of just, waiting until I die, basically. Because if that's all my life is, why wait? That's where the sort of suicidal thinking comes in. And I'm not the sort of person who would really be inclined to kill myself. So I'm trying to find, like, other ways to just endure. Because I, like, the thing about suicide, apart from the obvious things, is, like, if you make an attempt and it goes badly, then you're physically injured and everyone's hovering over you all the time to make sure you don't try again. And I think that's worse than if I just don't try and can get through life without all the extra pain and extra annoying attention and all that, if that makes sense. So, I just think it's not a worth risk. My words are getting mixed up. I just think it's not a risk worth taking, and so that's why I don't try. And if I'm not going to try to kill myself, then I need to find ways to make it a little bit more bearable between now and a hopefully natural death, if that makes sense. Sorry to get a little bit morbid. So I want to try and do something. I just want to try and make life a bit more interesting and not suck and feel like maybe it's sort of going somewhere. I mean, I know it's not, like, it doesn't really change anything, but just be nice to have something that I can focus on more. I don't know. I hope that makes sense. Also, with SPD, there's been a few videos where I've talked about how it's made me look at my childhood and recognize the trauma of growing up with a disabled sibling, and the fact that I'm a glass child, which you can look up on the internet if you don't know what that is. See, the thing is, before my diagnosis of SPD, I just didn't recognize that I had any trauma, and, you know, I guess a bit of denial, and also just not realizing what an impact that had on my life. So it's not something I ever explored. I mean, when I remember in the past, like, you know, throughout my life, people have said, you know, it must be so hard having a disabled brother, whatever. But, you know, I would always be like, oh, it's fine, because, you know, I've never known anything else. To me, it's just normal. And, you know, maybe that was part of the coping mechanism, is just to not realize what a big impact it had. But now that I've sort of taken a step back and seen, here are the different points that it affects my life, and gone, oh, wow, that's actually a lot. So, you know, like, I have had some kind of a trauma. It's not the normal sort of trauma where you have like something big and dramatic and maybe violent happen to you. It's more of this long-term slow burn kind of thing that still impacts my life. I mean, that's part of the reason I'm tired today, is being woken up at 5 once again. Oh, and, you know, just because I didn't sleep well the night before, it just sort of builds up. But, you know, there's a lot of stuff, like, you know, my family having to, like, it's really hard to go on a holiday as a whole family, so usually it'd just be like half the family goes and half the family stays home. Things about, you know, social life. I mean, I was never very social, but I think my other brother expressed that sometimes people didn't want to come over because of the situation. And, like, you know, there's all these little things. And then also for me, more specifically, like, yeah, just my needs not being met, I guess, and not even realizing that I had needs. Like, that's the level that it's been buried. So with trauma, like, I've been trying to work through it myself, but I don't actually know much about how you work through trauma, like, properly or safely or in a way that makes a difference, instead of just being, isn't that interesting? Because that's kind of the point where I'm at now, is like, oh, isn't it interesting that I went through this stuff and it probably affected me that way? But that doesn't help me. It's just an interesting thing. Like, okay, what do I do about it? That kind of stuff, I don't know, because I was in denial, and if I didn't recognize that I had trauma, you know, I'm kind of, when it comes to psychology, I'm more interested in things that affect me, and so if I didn't think that affected me, I never looked it up, and so I don't know how it works. So maybe by going to therapy, I can, like, you know, she'll be able to help me understand what the hell I'm supposed to be doing with processing trauma. And that is one of the areas that she's interested in, particularly trauma related to family issues. So yeah, that's a good match there. And then the other thing that I want to maybe explore is dissociation. Now, dissociation tends to be linked to trauma, so maybe that'll all tie in. But I think some of the dissociation I experience might be a little bit different. I think some of it might just be related to sort of the depression, maybe a bit of the schizoid thing. I mean, it's hard to know what causes what, right? But the whole existential angst and, like, you know, none of this is real kind of thing is maybe not necessarily trauma, but just the fact that I'm floating through life and my life doesn't change very much and I'm not connected to the outside world. And if you're not connected to the world you live in, why not make it feel like it's not real? Yeah, I don't know if that makes sense. Like, I don't really participate in the world that we're in. So yeah, if I don't participate, why should it feel real? Of course it feels distant, and maybe that's getting worse as time goes on, especially with the pandemic. I definitely feel that I've gone backwards in terms of progress of what I now understand to be probably schizoid traits. Because there was a period of time where I overcame a lot of that. I think I was on antidepressants at the time. That maybe helped. I can't take them anymore because of how badly they messed me up physically. The one that I was on longest, my weight was getting really low. And you know, at some point I stopped being able to eat because of those antidepressants. So yeah, nothing else has worked out. There's always something that goes really badly wrong, and you know, maybe one day I'll try some kind of antidepressant again, but I can't function on them, so I need to be in a specific situation in my life for it to be worth having a go. Anyway, blah 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 blah. So that's a long way of saying what I want to get out of therapy is helping to get through, you know, the current bunch of depression I keep experiencing, wanting to find a way to get my life back on some kind of track instead of just being in this stagnant, lethargic, just passing the time kind of thing that I'm stuck in. Maybe working out what to do about processing trauma, and maybe working out how to handle dissociation, what it means. Dissociation though is so broad. Like, I've heard with schizoids, most seem to be describing it as an emotional detachment thing, but there's also, derealization, where nothing seems real, depersonalization, where you feel disconnected from yourself, or maybe that yourself isn't real, like stuff like that. And then also some identity issues, which if you got to the end of the Moon Knight ramble, you know what I'm talking about there, hopefully. Anyway, so that's why I'm giving therapy a go. Oh, a couple other points about why I'm trying therapy and not other things. So antidepressants and other medications, I've already mentioned I have these ridiculous sensitivities, like even the nasal spray for my hay fever. I think that was starting to make me a little bit depressed, but cross fingers I'm doing okay now. Sometimes it's hard to know. Anyway, so therapy is kind of like the least extreme thing I can try at the moment, and so I'm kind of like, if it helps, I would rather do therapy than my other options. So my other options at this point, my GP's talked about how she's happy to give me a referral for TMS, transcranial magnetic stimulation, where they put magnets on your brain and all that kind of stuff. And it sounds kind of full on because you have to go like multiple sessions over a long period of time. Now, they do say that side effects are pretty limited, like most people tolerate it pretty well. But most people tolerate, low-level antidepressants pretty well. And most people can take antihistamines just over the counter without, going into a super deep depression like I did with Claritine. So given that my brain doesn't react the way that most people do, and I have heard some people report some pretty bad side effects from TMS, that just makes me a little bit reluctant. I mean, on the upside, there is evidence that it could help with anhedonia, and I'm sorry, I just had a moment of that sort of depersonalization thing where I'm talking and then suddenly I'm just like watching myself talking and I'm like, oh, and it's kind of tempting to just stop talking. It's a weird thing. Because then I'm like, why am I saying all this stuff? Anyway, my brain's just... Anyway, so yeah, TMS, I might end up being one of those unlucky ones who has a bad reaction to it, and yeah, so I'd rather not try it unless I have to, because like at least with antidepressants or other medications, after a day or two, my body has processed it and got it out of my system. But I don't know, like, the brain is a bit different and you're using magnets to stimulate stuff, and like, how do you get that out of your system? Does it just go after a while? Or I don't know. I guess I have a little bit less confidence that if it goes badly, it'll just get out of my system. But yeah, no, like I think I was saying it does have some promising results for anhedonia in the research, which is a problem that I have. And I guess it's a big schizoid thing as well, having anhedonia. So it would be good if I could treat that. But yeah, I'm just a little bit nervous about that possibility. Other thing I could try is inpatient stuff, which, yeah, okay, so you have the regular psychology and psychiatry things going on, and maybe they won't work for me. And also, like, if I did it privately, that would cost a lot of money because my private health insurance doesn't cover it. But I'd have to be doing pretty badly, I think, to get into a public one. Anyway, no, when I was looking up inpatient services, I think the thing that would most be helpful maybe is just that they kind of change your routine, and so you have breakfast at a certain time, like your sleep pattern would end up having to fit with their schedule, and then they try and make you do more exercise and all that kind of stuff. And I was sort of like, well, even if the psychology side and psychiatry side of things didn't help me, at least it might get my patterns back on track. But then I'm like, if that's all that I expect to get from that experience, shouldn't I just go on a holiday somewhere? And then I don't want to go on a holiday somewhere because I know I wouldn't be able to self-motivate to do all the exercise and stuff, and I sort of just go on this sort of like, okay, in that case maybe I should do the inpatient thing. but, you know, and I don't want to do group therapy in some of the places where I've read about stuff. There was one place I read that was just like all group therapy, and I'm like, what? What's the point of that? You know, you say you tailor it to people, but if all you're doing is group therapy lectures and activities, like, is that really tailored to each person, or is this just an easy way to make a buck? I think that one might have been more geared towards addiction rather than all problems with me. So, yeah, I don't know. Anyway, basically, I want to avoid some of those more full-on treatment options. So, psychotherapy just seems like, okay, let's give it one more go. Hopefully it'll help this time. And, you know, even though therapy has never really helped in the past, now I understand it a bit better. I understand that there's more than just CBT and ACT. I understand that I have a personality disorder and that certain approaches don't work as well with personality disorders. Like, there's so much more that I understand now that I didn't, you know, 15 years ago when I was first just shoved with whoever, who only, you know, the kinds of therapists who only see like your regular cases of depression and anxiety and relationship problems and whatever. You know, I know a lot more now about what I'm going through, and, you know, I guess I've got a better idea of what I want from therapy. I think last year when I tried therapy, I was still trying to figure out like what's wrong with me, whereas now I have a better idea. So I can be like, okay, this is my problem, along with these other things. This is the approach that I need or that I'm hoping for, and here are things that I don't want you to do. So like on my intake form for this new clinic, I did say like I don't want to do the things that have failed in the past, and I don't want to do mindfulness meditation garbage all the time. Like, I want it to actually address some of these issues. Like, that intake form included like, have you been in therapy before, what worked, what didn't, blah blah blah. So yeah, I wrote a lot of stuff. And yeah, I was able to suggest on that, you know, I'd like to try a bit of schema therapy. Now, why do I say schema therapy? When it comes to schizoid personality disorder, there's not really any proven treatments, right? And it can be hard because, yeah, a lot of schizoids are, like, I'm more covert. I've learned to be able to talk. I do seem to slip into particular modes of being. So, like, I've got my YouTube talking to the camera persona, although this vlog persona is a little bit different to my fashion persona. If some of you watch both kinds of content, you'll realize that, you know, there's just different ways about how I do stuff. And I guess those are the main things you guys would see me doing. But yeah, no, different situations, I sort of go into different modes. And so, like, and sometimes it's so automatic that I just don't, you know, I might even say things or do things that aren't exactly in my interests just to get through the social interaction. I think that's something that's going on. Yeah, it's kind of weird to think about. But anyway, no, so, yeah, treating schizoids is difficult because, you know, keep to yourself. Don't want to open up, maybe. Don't think anything is particularly wrong with how you think about the world. And I still don't think there's anything wrong with how I, you know, view the world, but I recognize that I have to work within the world that I'm given. Like, the world's not going to change just because I have a disorder and, ooh, you know, I need things to be a bit different, but, you know, no one's going to change the way the world is, so. But anyway, yeah, no, basically, schizoid, hard to treat. There's no real proven treatment approach that I'm aware of. But with schema therapy, so how I got onto that is I've got a friend who's studying clinical psychology and, you know, talking to people and whatever, and she reckons that schema therapy is a little bit more geared towards personality disorders in general, because, like, there's a lot of personality disorders and they tend to be more ingrained. Like, you know, when someone just has depression, that can be like situational or, you know, just a brief thing, and you can sort of deal with, you know, the immediate concern or the surface level concern, and that'll be fine for most people. But with schema therapy, I don't know a whole lot because I keep glazing over when I try and read about it, but the idea is, like, it goes into some deeper issues and deeper beliefs that you have, and kind of works more with the cause, I guess, and, you know, trying to work out more of the core of the problem instead of the surface level, just getting you through the situation now. So yeah, I think it was designed for personality disorders, and so I'm like, well, I'll give it a go. Some of the stuff that I've read about it, I'm a bit like, sounds a bit weird and maybe counterproductive to some of the issues I have regarding my sense of self, but it sounds different, and I'll try it, and I guess I'll report back over the next few weeks, and whatever. But no, I've had my first session with the new therapist, and she seems very open. And when we were discussing this kind of stuff, she said, okay, we're not going to do like pure schema therapy, but it'll be part of stuff. I think she mentioned also a bit of DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy, which I think is basically CBT with some mindfulness components, maybe. So I'm a bit like, I'm not sure about that. But I know that DBT was developed to help borderline personality disorder, which is basically the opposite personality disorder to what I have. But, if we combine that with the schema therapy and some of the more trauma stuff, she's trying to come up with a therapy program that's more tailored to my situation, my problems, and maybe mixing things up a bit. And so, yeah, we'll see. It was cool that she, seemed to know what schizoid personality disorder means. Like, that itself is, like, just enough for me to be like, this is cool. Someone actually knows what this is, because there's a lot who apparently don't. A while back, my friend was trying to find me someone who had experience with schizoid personality disorder, and one guy came back and he made it sound like maybe he'd mistaken it for schizophrenia, the way he'd reacted. So, you get a bit of that, and then you get, like, the people saying, oh, we don't have the experience to deal with this disorder. So, yeah, it was good that she felt like that. But another thing that made me feel better is, even though I can talk perhaps in a more animated way than your average schizoid, at no point did she say, you don't have this disorder, which is a problem I had with my second psychologist when I first suggested, what if I've got schizoid personality disorder? She said, oh no, you don't fit this case study, blah, 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 so you can't have it. No, this therapist didn't do any of this kind of stuff. She's like, just, probably the closest she got was just like to say, okay, so you realize this is just a label, right? And I'm like, yeah, I realize it's just a label. But she also said, it's just a label. It's helped you understand, more about yourself. And I'm like, that's fine. That's how I view it. Yes, it's just a label. I don't want it to become like my identity or to try and cling to it in any kind of way. But yeah, the main benefit of having the diagnosis is just I understand myself better and potentially what works for me or what might work for me, why other therapies didn't work for me. So yeah, I felt that her attitude to it was very balanced. Instead of like being too obsessively like, oh, you have schizoid, that means this, this, this. On one extreme, on the other extreme being like, oh no, you don't fit because this is this. I feel like she got the middle is like, yes, you have it, it's just a label, we'll work with it, but let's not get too attached. I like that approach. So, that was a pretty positive kind of thing. Yeah. I mean, when I'm in therapy, I notice it's the same, I think, in the doctor's office, and anytime I'm in these kinds of interview type situations, I notice I'm looking around the room and just spotting patterns. So on the wall behind her, she had a portrait of, not a portrait, a landscape painting. It's like the beach, and then there's these fencing and the shadow goes in a particular way, and then you've got the little grass tufts coming out of the sand dunes in a particular way, and that was super distracting, I think. Yeah, it's funny how my brain latches onto those kinds of details. Anyway, I don't actually remember everything that we talked about in therapy. I think it's just like, she had my history and was trying to fill in some of the gaps that I hadn't written about. Yeah. And then she also said I could email her. Now, the previous psychologist I saw said I could email her, but I never really felt, like that was a thing to do. But this time she said, oh yeah, you can email me. I can only really answer on the days that I'm working. So there might be a delay, but blah, blah, blah. And I said, email you about like anything in particular? Like, what should I email you about? And she just said anything. So after the session, after our first session, she had asked me a bit about my experience of dissociation, but I only really went into derealization and depersonalization. And then afterwards, when I left the place and my therapy mode, my therapy persona sort of dropped and I was out like going to get lunch, then I realized like I just skipped over, like I gotten distracted and didn't talk about my sense of self. So, I was posting lenses. They're like lens stories. Lens is Patreon's version of stories. And so I posted some of them being like, I didn't say any of this stuff. Should I send her an email? And my Patreon guy's like, yeah, why not? So I wrote like 3 pages. I think it was 2,200 words, maybe. Definitely over 2,000 words of stuff about my sense of self to my therapist on that night. Is that 2 nights ago? I don't even remember. Time's all because my life is so boring. God, time moves so slowly at the moment. But yeah, I wrote her a really long thing about my sense of self, and I think I'll make that as a separate video because we're already over half an hour. But she actually read it and was very positive about it and said, yeah, this was a thing that we were going to address. I'm glad you've expanded on it. So that was really good because like some of the stuff about my sense of self I'm a little bit sensitive about. And, the fact that she was okay with me sending this massive ramble, in the middle of the night. Yeah, I was a little bit worried, like, some of it makes me sound really crazy, so I was a bit worried maybe she'd be like, oh, actually, we don't have the expertise for that. But no, she was very positive, so there's some more good signs there. And the first session is always more of a getting to know you thing, and not a whole lot happens in terms of, therapy that you can actually do anything with. But, we'll see. First impression is okay. The sun has decided to hide behind a cloud. Okay, and then the last thing to mention in a sort of rambly way. I posted in the community tab on YouTube a video about the link between hay fever and, depression, but like suicidal thoughts and so on. And it's interesting. It's from SciShow. It's a few years old. And it's about how, in America at least, where you have actual seasons, in Australia, we've got flowers in autumn, and hay fever is like a year-long thing for me. We don't have a proper winter here. Like, it gets cold, but it's not snowing in Sydney. So in America, where they actually have seasons, it turns out that people are more likely to kill themselves in spring rather than like winter. We hear about the winter blues, people get seasonal affective disorder, but no, it seems to be in spring that people decide to kill themselves more often. And it's to do with how, they think it's something to do with how hay fever triggers some immune responses and cytokines in the brain and so on, and it kind of changes your behavior and stuff. I've also seen, there's research around about how inflammation might have something to do with mental health conditions. Now, I don't know that causation has been established. It might just be some weird coincidence. Maybe one causes the other. I don't know that they've figured that out. But I just thought that was kind of interesting because I do have some pretty frustrating hay fever problems. And yeah, I just sort of wonder how much that plays into at least my depression. I think schizoid personality disorder is maybe more to do with my situation growing up, but in terms of depression, yeah, there'd be some of the schizoid anhedonia, blah blah, but maybe it's worse because of these more physical factors. And as I've gotten older, I've gotten a few more stomach issues, like I've lost my ability to tolerate lactose and also soy, which is embarrassing because I'm half Japanese and I can't handle a whole bunch of soy. So it means if I have to be careful about how much soy sauce I use and how much miso I have, or I have to make sure I'm near a bathroom in the hour or so after eating it. But yeah, no, just like the other night we had lasagna and I had a little bit too much, and the hours following were a little bit unpleasant. But, so your stomach as well has to do with, brain chemicals. There's like a lot of neurotransmitters are actually in your stomach, and there's a link between your gut and your brain. And I've just been sort of wondering about that a bit more. Because, these physical problems of hay fever, or if you want to get fancy, allergic rhinitis. I'm just wondering, the hay fever and the stomach issues, there's some link with my brain there. Like maybe it could be the other way around. Like maybe because my brain is out of whack, my lifestyle has not been great, and maybe that's exacerbated at least things to do with my stomach, perhaps because I don't eat the right stuff all the time, or I don't know. Or it could be that maybe having the hay fever and having, predispositions, like, Asians are less likely to be able to process lactose, and I'm half Asian. So, like maybe there's those biological factors that have made me more susceptible to things to do with depression. This is something that I'm wondering about, is like how much of this is physical factors, and like, maybe antidepressants aren't necessarily the right answer because they target more of the brain. Like, what if there was a way to target more of my physical problems? Now, of course, the flaw in this plan is I've reacted badly to some antihistamines. Like, I can take kids' Dimetapp happily, but Claritine, a few years ago, I discovered that was really not good for my mental health. I went into such a deep depression, and it was like this really weird chemical feeling of depression. I don't know how to explain it other than that. Yeah, so that antihistamine, and then I think I also tried like Nasonex, which was just the corticosteroid nasal spray, and that threw me off as well. And potentially the Dymista that I'm on now, although, yeah, I think I've managed it to a point that maybe I'm doing okay. I can't tell if that's real or a psychological thing, or maybe I've just passed the point that my body needed to adjust it. I don't know. I think I'm doing a little bit better. Or I could have been wrong. Maybe it didn't affect my mood and it was just coinciding with a bad mood swing. It's hard to know sometimes. But with the other ones, I felt like that was more of an obvious impact. And those antihistamines and the corticosteroid that I tried in the past, they made me feel more depressed. And that's something SciShow, I think, brings up as well, is sometimes the medications used to treat hay fever can help the hay fever, but worsen the mood. And so, it seems like a kind of a complicated interaction. May depend a little bit on biological differences between people, but yeah, I don't know. It would be nice if I could find something that could treat the hay fever and the depression at the same time. But yeah, there's not like a blood test you can do to figure out which medication is going to work the best for you. But yeah, and then, is there something I could do for my stomach that would make me feel better? I've heard the extremes about getting like a poo transplant so that you get the right gut bacteria. That can be a thing. But I've also heard that like probiotics don't necessarily help because they've got too much of like specific kinds of good bacteria, and you actually need like a certain balance in your stomach. And I wonder, are there certain combinations of gut bacteria that are better for people than others? I don't know, like there's just a lot of stuff that I've been wondering about, and this video's gone on really long, and yeah, that's just a bunch of stuff that's going on in my head at the moment. So I'm giving therapy another go. It's a little bit too early to have a proper opinion, but I guess I'm like cautiously optimistic that this might go better than some therapy in the past. I think maybe we've established a bit more of a therapeutic relationship that, maybe understands what I'm after a bit better. Because I think in the past, like, I'd turn up and just sort of go with whatever the therapist said. But now I'm like, I understand a bit more about therapy. Here are some specific things I want to address, and here are some specific things I want to try. And maybe I've got a more realistic idea of what therapy is, because, when I was younger, watching stuff like Wire in the Blood, and it sort of makes it look like psychologists can just read you and, know when you're hiding stuff and, pick up these subconscious signals. But in reality, they're mostly just, people who've gone to uni and done a bit of training, and yeah, they've got some knowledge in certain areas, but, in the end, they're just your regular people who won't pick up any more than the average person anyway. Yeah, so maybe just I've gotten a bit more of maybe a more mature perspective of what therapy might be able to do for me, plus knowing how schizoid affects that. Yeah, so we'll see how things go, and I will try to do more on YouTube. It depends a little bit, just because my situation is not conducive to making videos. And for some reason, like, I watched a video I made back in 2009, and, like, just I don't know why I can't make videos like that anymore. Like, I used to just not give a crap, and now for some reason I've got this problem with anxiety and well, is it anxiety? I don't think I consciously experience the anxiety, but like that's what it looks like when I observe myself. And then the clash between, like, one of the things that makes it difficult is I have my YouTube persona or voice or whatever you want to call it, but I also have my being at home way of being. And when I have two different modes of being and they clash, it's distracting and it's really difficult to get through. And I didn't used to have that problem quite as badly, so I'm not sure why. Like, have I become more insecure somehow? Like, what is it that's changed that I can't make YouTube videos with the freedom that I did before? That's something else I probably want to, maybe I should talk about in therapy, is just, why is everything so much harder now? Like, I'm supposed to be the same person, right? But what is it that changed that made it harder? Is it because I'm relying more on the people around me for my survival, and maybe I'm worried that, disapproval might jeopardize my survival in some ways? Is it like that kind of subconscious thing, or is it just being out of practice because I took a huge break from vlogging for a few years? I don't know what it is, but I would like to make more videos with that sort of freedom and not giving a crap. Maybe it's that more people in my real life know that I do YouTube now and might be watching, but I don't really think about that. So I don't know. I don't know what it is, but I want to try and do more YouTube, because, yeah, Facebook is just turning out to have no idea what it's doing. I love Facebook as a platform because it's not shallow like Instagram. You can actually write stuff, and, you don't have to have a picture with every damn post. And there's more flexibility in what you can do, like those groups, and there's just, I feel like it used to be a very functional platform. Of course, now they keep restricting your reach, and now they're hitting me with restrictions just for making a casual joke with friends. I wasn't actually threatening anyone. And 10 years ago, the kinds of stuff I used to write on Facebook with those kinds of violent joking around, I would have been banned if the rules today were the same back then. And so, yeah, like, that's not helpful. If I'm trying to get back to the freedom of expression I used to have, Facebook's not encouraging that. All they're doing is encouraging more self-censorship. Whereas, if I say the wrong thing on YouTube, the worst that can happen, really, is that I might get demonetized, and I'm not really here to be making money. So that's not really a problem, is it? So, because, YouTube, if they're going to penalize you, you can appeal. There's like established processes. They don't say, oh, you've had too many, you're not allowed to appeal anymore. And then they also don't, if they realize they got something wrong, they don't hold that over you for the rest of whenever, like Facebook seems to have. Oh, we got this wrong, we're sorry, but we're still going to use it to give you more restrictions. I don't understand the logic there. I give Facebook feedback, but I guess I'm sure they never read it, because, they just keep making the platform worse and worse and breaking good features. And yeah, I'm just frustrated with where it's going. Like, I know there's controversy around Facebook, but those were not my problem. What my problem is the way that they're affecting my interactions on Facebook now, which are different to everyone else's problems with Facebook. So yeah, I just think I need to start distancing myself from that platform. But because my video situation is difficult, I guess I'm going to be posting more of those kinds of thoughts on Patreon. And I know, I'm sorry, it's behind a paywall and some of you might be genuinely interested, but I have kept everything at, the $1 original thing. I was going to add some extra stuff, I just haven't got around to it. But if I do add higher level tiers, it's not going to be to restrict content, it'll just be for more fun stuff. Sorry, my nose, even though I use that stuff, my nose is starting to get a bit clogged again. Yeah, no, if I do add higher tiers to Patreon, it'll just be more fun extra stuff rather than me hiding more stuff behind higher levels of paywall, if that makes sense. So yeah, I'm thinking, because Patreon has a similar flexibility to Facebook, it's not quite as easy to use, but it's the closest platform I have, I think, because like Twitter is ridiculous. 240 characters or whatever, that is not enough for me to express anything. Instagram is shallow as hell, and if you've ever logged in to see what my Instagram looks like, you'll see it's mostly Punk Rave Australia. You know, it's more the polished side of life, because I just can't be bothered. You know, I've tried writing more honest stuff on Instagram and no one gives a crap. It's the sort of audience that Instagram attracts. There's a lot of people who I think are impaired in some way alongside, you know, the rest of us. And yeah, I think because they're used to shallow interactions. I mean, some of the people who comment on my Instagram just leave a series of emojis and that's it. Maybe some of it's a language barrier, but some of it, I think they just don't know what to say. They have nothing meaningful to say. So I just reply to them in a whole bunch of emojis that don't really mean anything. I kind of reply to people at the level that they comment to me on that platform, and very few people have anything interesting to say. So yeah, Instagram is not an alternative. And also Instagram is owned by Facebook, so the same sort of censorship will eventually bleed in there. And then I don't want to try any like super alternative platforms, because some of them, I just don't trust them. Some of them have weird political bents that I'm not interested in. Tumblr I've never understood, doesn't seem like the place for me, doesn't have the privacy levels. Yeah, so in the end I've just been like, no, okay, Patreon and YouTube. YouTube, all the public stuff when I get a chance to record. Patreon can have some of the more personal stuff, and that's how I'm going to try and manage it. Because, yeah, Facebook has really let me down. Anyway, now what am I going to do with the rest of my day? Oh, that's right, I've got to make a Patreon post about my latest studio stuff, and I had a list of things to do. Yeah, it's funny, like, my life isn't going anywhere, but I still seem to have these long to-do lists. Some of them I don't, like, I've had to-do lists of YouTube videos, and I just never get around to them. Like, that's another frustrating thing, is there's a lot of stuff that I think some part of me wants to do, but I just don't do them. I've got so much stuff to work through, so I guess that's why I'm in therapy. It's just like, why is everything so hard? I can come up with ideas, but I just can't get onto them. It's really difficult. I'm distracted, I lack focus, my concentration is not going great. And then, yeah, okay. I think that's a solid video. I know, it's like once a week at the moment, and maybe doing a long video makes up for that. But I know when I see a long video, I'm like, oh, I don't know that I want to sit down and commit to that, so I'll try and do some shorter stuff as well, but